Hello, I am Kelly Rogers Flint, a freelance writer based in Alameda, California.
And I'm Loyd McIntosh, freelance writer based in Birmingham, Alabama.
And together we are The Rough Draft, a writing podcast.
Kelly, I almost forgot what you sound and look like. It's been a while since we.
It's been a hot minute, or maybe a cold minute. It's been winter, but
Well, you're
it,
in California, so you really have much winter at all,
mm, no, but we did have some cold days, some rainy days. We did. There was some frost on the trail a couple of weeks ago
No,
when I was hiking
frost on the
in the
trail.
in the redwoods. Yeah,
We had a really cold January for Alabama. We had some
yeah.
snow, and I hate it. It just that, but we did have a couple of snow days for the my wife and everything. So,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. The problem with snow in Alabama is that you're just not prepared for it.
what?
Snow is not bad if you have the proper shoes and clothes, and there are services that
Yeah,
clear the streets and all of those things. But if you don't have a snow shovel, it can, and those
yeah, it
sort of things,
sucks.
it makes it much harder. Yeah.
We were in Baltimore years ago. My daughter had a medical thing. She had to go to Baltimore all the time, and it started snowing there. And I always assumed Baltimore was, even though it's you know not north like Michigan or Minneapolis or
Mhm.
anything like that. I always kind of figured it was prepared for winters, but everything's shut down. Like we couldn't
Oh.
get a pizza, we couldn't get anything. I was stunned
Hmm.
about. I figured Baltimore would be ready for it, but they didn't appear to be.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Yikes. Yeah, that makes a big difference in the way you experience it.
yeah.
Um, I think I've told you before. I did a little study abroad in what was then the Soviet Union,
Hmm.
and for the month of January,
Oh God.
when I was in college. I know, but I tell you what, you want to talk about some place that is prepared for snow? Um, that would be Moscow.
Even that, I still can't
Mhm.
imagine the cold temperatures. Even if it's prepared and you know it, I just can't imagine dealing with it.
Yeah, it was
I
cold. It
can't.
was, it was cold.
Good Lord. I mean that was a cool. I mean, 20s to me here. When it hits 20 or something or 15.
Hmm.
Now I did buy a car back in July. This is my first car where I can do like set my you uh, presets from my phone, so I don't have to go
Oh.
out in the street and start the car. I can start it from
Mm.
my house. I go outside. I get in the car. It's 80 degrees. That is fancy living to me.
That is a nice feature.
Yeah.
A
So
nice
let's
feature.
why
Okay.
don't let's catch everybody up. We last
Sure.
podcast was back in October, I believe, and we're now recording on February 8th. And both of us had a lot of stuff going on. So catch us up, Kelly. What's been going on with you over the last few months?
The holiday season is usually really busy with theater. There were a lot of good shows out there, good reviews. One not so good Thanksgiving show I saw. It was very problematic in many, many ways. Um,
Oh, do tell.
oh, oh, oh.
Did you
Well,
write about it?
yes, yes,
You
yes.
reviewed
And
it?
it's literally called the Thanksgiving play. And I'm sure it gets chosen because people are looking for something to do at that time
Yeah,
of year.
of course.
Um, and
Come on, just spill it. How
okay,
bad
okay.
was it?
Well,
Okay,
all right.
go for
So
it.
the premise of the show is that it's a high school trying to do a show about Thanksgiving, but they want it all to include the viewpoints of Native Americans, and so they think they've hired a Native American actor to be in their thing, and it turns out it's just an actor who does Native American,
Oh,
but is not
Jesus.
actually Native American. And so now they're all like, oh, we can't do this because, we don't, it gets, it's very
Yeah,
convoluted. And they're trying to make the point about how most of that history is a one-sided history. It doesn't include the point of view of major participants of that era, but they don't ever resolve it.
that's it.
The show
Yeah,
doesn't tell you how to fix what we should do about it. It just kind of says, "Ah, it's a problem,"
yeah, yeah.
and they go through these various things that become more and more absurd about ways to try to get around doing it, like having empty chairs to represent the unspoken Native American voices and just all these awkward, weird things. So it
Was it
just,
one of those where it's so bad it was good, or was it just bad? Like you couldn't even enjoy the absurdity of it.
the acting was very good.
Okay.
So that was,
Okay. So that was
so
you
there
get
were
that.
things I could say, I enjoyed that person's performance, but the actual play was a poor choice. And then, they're doing this play, and then it's a thing here. I'm not sure if it's made its way to the South, but theaters and places have land acknowledgments on their websites and their
Oh,
programs
I've
and
heard
stuff.
that crap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So,
I mean,
say, we're just recognizing that we're on the, ancestral lands of whatever tribe and blah, blah, blah. And this theater didn't. And I'm like, you're doing this play and you don't even have land acknowledgement?
I mean, I
Mm.
would expect it where you are. Down
Oh,
here,
it's
I'm
the
like,
only
I don't give a
theater I've been in that hasn't.
really. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
that kind of, I don't know. I mean, we're not here to debate it, but
Yeah. Yeah. So,
I don't give a
but
shit.
the choice to do that play and not have it
In
certainly
California, I'm
made
really quite stunned
it
that
was
they didn't
like,
go there.
right. So that was
Uh,
problematic. And then,
so
the holiday shows after that, there are only so many times that you can see some of them before you really start banging your head.
yeah,
And everyone tries to do a twist on A Christmas Carol, and I'm here for it, but they're not. There are
yeah.
levels of success, and some.
Honest. That's honestly even like television shows I like. Like I'm a big Frasier fan. I avoid all the Thanksgiving and Christmas episodes. I hate them. I really do. I just like I avoid like the radio stations and all of it.
Mm,
I to me this is like it's like I've heard it over and over again. I can't stand it anymore.
yeah,
I avoid all that. Any kind of content that's about Thanksgiving or Christmas, I tend to just zone out. I was like, I can't handle another like you mentioned,
hmm
you know, uh, anyway,
Christmas Carol,
Christmas
yeah,
Carol or Christmas,
Miracle in
yeah.
34th
I
Street,
can't handle any
another
more
the
interpretations
same.
of it. It's like I get
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Like, what's the Christmas that whatever.
yeah,
Can't stand
yeah.
it.
No, in my house, our Christmas traditions are more like we watch Die Hard.
We have lots of food. We do
Yeah, we
normally
have lots of food. Yeah.
we do waffles. We didn't do waffles this year, but normally the
Oh,
thing is
yeah.
waffles.
Christmas
And
Day is Christmas morning. We
yeah,
definitely do
yeah,
waffles. That's the thing. But yeah,
yeah,
so yeah, holidays can be tough for theater because of that. Because so many theaters feel compelled to do a holiday show,
yeah.
and they're just aren't. So hey, playwrights out there, if you're looking for a topic, please give us something fresh. Yeah,
Or just say we're gonna for those of you who want to just avoid it, all that stuff like the plague.
yeah. Or
Here's a
theaters,
play for
yeah,
you.
yeah. Be
You
the
know,
be the one theater in town that's showing
I,
something that's not a holiday show.
I want something that's palm trees and summer. I don't want to think about the cold weather. I don't want to think about any of that. Just give me something that's just the Jimmy Buffett story. What the hell?
Yeah. So I've survived through that. Now I'm on the other
Um,
side, and there's some interesting
yeah.
things going on. Saw a really good show last week called Grand Horizons. I've got one coming up this next week. Um, what am I seeing this week? Gosh, I've already forgotten the name of it. But I got another one coming this week, and
Cool.
starting in March, I am going to get to be a guest reviewer for the Sound on Stage, which is another place reviews are done
Oh,
in
that's
the
great.
Seattle area. So when I travel back and forth, I can still get some review time in Seattle. So that'll be great.
That's awesome. Well,
So
I
yes.
had uh, an interesting situation late November. I've been covering high school football here in Alabama, and I hadn't covered the way the publications that I was working for worked. They owned 6 newspapers in the area, and just depending on who was available and what teams were in town, you would just draw a random game, right? So I did several at my alma mater, Hewitt Trustful High School, did a couple of Mountain Brook, Homewood, whatever. These are all Birmingham area
Mhm.
suburbs, right? I hadn't covered Hoover High School this year at all. So I drew it for the second round of the playoffs. However, the week before, Auburn High School was in the playoffs. They had a bye. Their head coach snuck into the game with a fake press pass, and our camera people, our photographer, caught him, took a picture of him, which went out on our social media. He got caught and was suspended for the game that I was covering. Now, I had not covered Hoover at all that year. So here's this new guy showing up. Like, who the hell are you? Which school are you from? Are you from? I literally had a player on the sideline like ask me which school I was spying for. That was an awkward game. Yeah, so I was like, dude, I promise you, I'm real. This is a real pass. Some of the kids in the students wore fake press passes as a gag. I've got some pretty good photos. But yeah, it was awkward. I mean, there were some parents. I was getting like sideways looks all night. Thank God the team won. They won in double overtime, and that was actually my last game of the year because the rest of our teams we didn't have enough teams for all of us to get a game. So it was just. But that was my end of the sports coverage this year. But that was an interesting. And that asshole, what an asshole to do that.
I know. It's if you look long enough at any subculture area, you're gonna find some drama. You're gonna find a soap opera. There's gonna be somebody pushing something.
He ended up what he did is he used his coach pass to get in the game, but he grabbed a student media pass to get him on the sideline. So he was scouting from the sideline. He was seeing everything. He was on their sidelines. He was hearing the coaches talk. I mean, it was just outrageous. He should have been. I mean, not only suspended, they should have fired him. I don't know if they did, but
Yeah, if he was going to do it, he should have just like hired a student.
I'm stunned. I mean, it only got
somebody who wouldn't be recognized, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it only got caught because, our photographers, the way we were doing things for that paper is photographers would, normally when you cover a game or something like that, you get one or two stories in print, but we publish everything online the next day. So our photographers get a chance to throw up there like 30 or 40 photos. So, the story goes online and there's my game story, but they'll put a gallery of, 30 photos, and that's how he got caught. Is someone from the state high school athletic association recognized him in one of our stories, and that's how he got suspended. But it was just made for an awkward game. Yeah. But
so what have you been writing on since then?
Well, that organization, that company eliminated all their freelance work right after that. So I lost all that at one fell swoop. So I've been picking up a bunch with some other hyper local magazines covering some suburbs in the area. So that's good. And then the Daily Home, which is a newspaper that covers Talladega County, and where I live in a town about 20 minutes from Talladega. So that newspaper and that media outfit covers my area. So I've been doing a lot of work for their special publications that go in the Daily Home, but they also have a monthly magazine. So I've been doing stuff for that too. And then there's another newspaper that covers the Birmingham communities that I had been covering, competing newspaper called the Over the Mountain Journal. So I've been writing for them a little bit and trying to find some other work now. So this is the life of a freelancer, the happened to me many times over the years. The publication you're writing for loves your work. Then all of a sudden they say, you know what, sales are down, we got to cut you. And so they cut all freelance labor at one time. That did happen to me at the Birmingham News once, Birmingham Magazine, several others. So it's just, it's kind of the life of the freelance journalist, man. Just you're rocking along, everything's great. Then, we can't use you anymore. Sorry. So that's what's happened to me.
Yep, absolutely. With the freelance, that happens that way, and you're not even safe if you're full time because they'll often decide to eliminate full time jobs and have multiple part time people so they can get around paying for, benefits and stuff.
Well,
It's
it,
all
it,
about cost savings.
it's about cost savings, and I understand. I mean, I know what you're saying there, but at the same time, I was doing ad sales for a little bit for a magazine about 6 years ago. I was in transition between one full-time job and another, and I worked for a company that did some local magazines, and I would call ad agencies and say, "Look, this is what we're doing. We got a great magazine. We're doing some things online," and they would just say, "Sorry, everything's Google." I steer all my that it was someone I knew. It was a media buyer that I had a relationship with. She said, "I'm steering all my clients to Google advertising." So it's not just that the publications are trying to save money. It's just the economic reality is that
Yeah.
ad sales are a problem. I would really like to see, because we talked about print months ago, but man, I would just like to see some advertisers just step up to the plate. Some big companies in some towns just say, we're going to advertise because it's the right thing, because we need this for the community, right? But it's that one of the publications I write for right now, they've outsourced all of their graphic design to, I don't know where to.
Mm,
So they don't have any internal graphic
yeah.
designers anymore, just because they can't afford them.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. Well, we
but it's
see
scary.
the same thing in theater, because the programs are full of ads, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Season sponsors, show sponsors, all of that, and then ads and they're getting harder and harder. In fact, I recently reviewed one show where all of the sponsors were individuals
really. Oh God,
as
really?
opposed to a
No
company.
corporate
Yes,
sponsors,
there
really?
were none. There were none. I was like, what is going on here?
Oh my God, really?
Is it so those I'm sure there are people that maybe have, it's a wealthy family that has a foundation or something maybe,
Yeah, but
or
still,
maybe they're, I don't know, but it caught my attention for sure because that
yeah,
is not the norm. Usually
yeah.
you have businesses stepping up, and it was like, oh, there are the businesses not supporting this local theater anymore.
Wow,
Maybe that's the story I need to write for the local paper.
that's a
What's happening with local
that's a
sponsorships?
good
And because I'm
idea.
sure it's carrying over to little league and
Yeah.
high school yearbooks and everywhere else where people are out there trying to get
I mean, just from my
ads.
full time, I mean, we don't talk about my full time job much, but I do marketing for a company, and we just haven't had any money. I mean, the economy was just the way it was. We just can't afford to advertise right now. We just,
Hmm.
it's like we just got to hang on for dear life. Things are picking up now, which is good, but it was a rough few years. Um, are you hearing a dog barking can you hear
I am
that?
not. I'm not. Are you hearing the
Yes,
construction
I've got
across
some
the
neighbors.
channel
I've
for
got some
me?
new neighbors that they built a new community behind me. And I think there's some dogs that are barking at each other all the damn time. And so I'm hearing these dogs barking in my earphones.
Mm.
So if you're hearing that on this podcast, I apologize. I live in Hillbilly Holler, Alabama, just the way it is. We don't, our neighbors don't have cute little yappy dogs that keep inside. They have big dogs that keep outside. You know, they don't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We don't have the
We
little
keep our
dust
big
mops.
dogs inside too.
Yeah, we don't have the little dust mops that never make a
Yeah.
sound. Anyway,
Oh my
so
goodness. Okay.
um, as we were getting ready, you had not had a wordplay word yet, but has something popped in your head,
No.
or would you rather me get started on that?
No, why don't you give us the one that you had planned?
Okay, so I was, again, I was thinking kind of on the fly, what am I going to talk about? And went online to, search for overused words or underused words, whatever. And as soon as I saw the word, I was like, of course, I know I've been avoiding this word as much as possible, but it's the word actually, because you can really sound like a know-it-all. My new favorite term right now is douchebag. You sound like a really know-it-all douche, just
Mm-hmm.
a smart ass if you use that too much. And so I've really been avoiding that. And there's some great memes out there. Have you ever seen the meme? Of course, this is an audio podcast, so we're not, not doing video. But there's a great meme of some like little snot-nosed kid saying the word actually, and they've spelled it, like they spelled it some weird, strange way. But you really can't come up, very insulting if you don't watch that word.
Mm-hmm.
When you've got to make a point that I mean, sometimes you're talking to somebody out in the workplace, and they just talking with you about something you do and they've gotten the information wrong and you've got to correct them, it's like, how do you
Hmm.
actually, Bob, it's like, how do you
Yeah.
phrase that in a way that's not going to put them on the defensive? And that word can easily put somebody on the defensive, even when you have
Yeah.
to correct something. Am I-
Yeah. I find that it's best used when you are reporting good information. Like
Oh, yeah.
if someone was asking you like, "Oh, how's your home rent going?" and you're like, "Well, actually, we've made a lot of progress," and you're reporting something that's positive, then it's a good because they're expecting some horror story from you, maybe
Yeah.
about the contractor doesn't show up, your stuff is delayed, blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah. But when you're reporting something good, and actually, then it's received better, of course, because you're giving them good news, I guess,
That's a great point. That's a
as
great point.
opposed to correcting them.
Yeah. Like,
So I don't think it's one we need to steer away from completely, but when you're using it to correct someone, that's when it gets very tenuous and can
yeah.
be, well, it can be unnecessary. You can still give the correct
Yeah.
information
And
without being an ass.
yeah, the
Right.
way I try to approach it is to say, hey, I know what you're saying, but this is actually, well, not that actually, I just said the
Mhm.
word actually, but, or maybe like I say, hey, I see your point, but here's what here's what the reality really is, or here's what the
Mhm.
numbers really show, or something like that, or here's how it really works, you know.
Mhm.
'Cause, yeah, I work with a lot of type A, our business is all about sales. My full-time job it is. And so, we have all of our salespeople
Mhm.
are like hyped up, type A, you know,
Yeah.
so they hear, don't do this, and they hear do this, or don't do that, and they hear do that. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, so it is a constant struggle that I can say, hey, you got that wrong. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to say, how do I, you know, so I have to don't use that word actually very often, just because
Yeah.
it could really, cause some, like you just said,
Yeah.
unnecessarily insulting somebody's intelligence by
Yeah,
accident.
well, and it also depends if you are countering their opinion versus something they're stating as fact.
Hmm, good
Because
point.
oftentimes
That's
something,
actually a
well,
good
and
point.
also it's actually a good,
Sorry.
but facts are strange things because multiple facts can be true that are different depending on your perspective. um, Maybe because you live somewhere different and someone may present something from their own life experience as fact, but you could counter with, well, from my perspective or what I have seen or what I have encountered is this that may be different to what they had, and
Yeah,
both can be true.
good point.
um,
Yeah, that's
so
solid.
but
All
it
right.
but is we should always be aware when we're using it, especially in written word where you don't have the benefit of clarifying if it's causing some kind of reaction that you didn't intend, because you don't get to see your readers read your work.
Yeah,
So be very careful in writing, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed, it's funny because as I thought about the word less about writing and more about conversations, particularly business
Hmm.
conversations, and so a big thing for me right now is tone of voice. I've written a lot about in my corporate communications at work, or monthly newsletter, weekly newsletter. I often talk about that. Is how tone of voice is affecting not only your sales but also maybe your customers and stuff like that. It's how um, you know it's interesting because well, the reason why is I was putting together a presentation. I've got to present in Nashville at our annual meeting here in a couple of weeks, and we do a survey every year. And one of our I work in staffing is what this is my full time gig, communications, marketing, and communications. And so the one of the questions that I get on that survey, um, is did what any situations or any problems handled within a timely manner. Now that question is left vague. timely manner. It didn't say within 24 hours or 48 hours.
Mm.
And I'm convinced that because that's the lowest score we get. It's a 5 question survey, and it's always the lowest score we get. Right? Everything else is better. That for our we interview both our talent and our associates and our clients, and that score is always the lowest, particularly on the talent survey, are the people who do the jobs and staffing. And I'm convinced it's tone of voice, it's body language, it's its attitude in handling a problem. And so that's been a big thing for me right now is maybe they got the situation handled in just a few minutes, but how did you react to somebody when they mentioned the problem to you? Particularly when we talk about in staffing, particularly in industrial staffing, you got a lot of workers who are going to not show up or say they're they had a flat tire or all sorts of excuses all the time. And the point is, even if that they just didn't wake up on time, it's still, you got to treat them like, okay, we'll call, we'll handle this with the client, we'll take care of it. And I think that's the tone of voice is so important. It just is. People don't think about it, but I try to watch it as best I can. I don't, because you can be trying to be helpful, but sound like a condescending, sound condescending and rude and insulting without even meaning to.
All right. So in summary,
yes.
It's not actually saying the word actually, but how you say it.
How you say it
matters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, did you think of something to talk about?
No, but I think we need to be mindful of our time, and maybe we're ready for a quick break, and come back with our next segment.
All right. So the next segment today, we haven't even talked about what our big topic's going to be. This is your topic, so you tell us what we're going to talk about.
Okay. The big topic for today is music lyrics. Is it literature?
Wait.
Is it not?
And I think there might be a hot debate about to happen because Loyd McIntosh is a contrarian, like a big time contrarian on this kind of stuff.
I think it has some interesting aspects that will be fun to discuss. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be back with you to talk about music lyrics as literature or not.
See you in a minute. And welcome back to the Rough Draft Writing Podcast. I'm Loyd McIntosh. I'm here with my co-host and friend, Kelly Rogers Flint. And we're going to have a little fun. I could see some debating happen. But Kelly came up with this great topic. We're going to discuss song lyrics, correct?
Yes. So over winter break, one thing we always like to do with our college-age kids is we all go to a movie together. And we went to see the new Bob Dylan movie. Have you seen it? With Timothy Chalamet?
I admit that you told me to go see it, and I did not follow your instructions yet. Sorry.
It got me really thinking because at the end of the movie, it talked about him receiving the Nobel Prize for Literature, and it being the first time that a lyricist, a songwriter, had ever received the Nobel Prize in Literature. And that started me thinking, oh. And then as I started exploring, I sent you those few articles. We found several articles that discuss this very topic, music lyrics, literature or not. And I was like, this sounds like a great thing to talk about as writers. How do we view music lyrics and what do we think?
I admit that I'm usually a little, like I said, a little contrarian on stuff like this. I don't know why I am, but I remember when I was in, you're about the same age I am, so I think we were the first generation. Gen X was really the first generation to really start picking back up and looking at the music of the 60s and 70s. Kind of, we all discovered Led Zeppelin and crap like that. So, well, people that heard of Led Zeppelin, but we're all like, have you heard of this band called Led Zeppelin?
Yeah.
like 19, Jimi Hendrix. Yeah, people kind of knew about it. But Dylan has always been one of those precious little, baby boom, you know, oh, Bob Dylan. Now,
Mm.
so I know he won it was what about 10 years ago that he won that award?
2016. Yeah.
Yeah, so about 10 years ago. And I remember it was controversial. And
Mhm.
one person that, again, I know you picked a topic, but I've been thinking, I know one songwriter who was not thrilled at all about that was Joni Mitchell. Do you remember that
No, I don't.
she ripped him a new asshole. I mean, she really I don't know what was going on with Joni Mitchell at the moment. I love Joni Mitchell. I mean, full. I adore Joni Mitchell, adore her.
Mhm.
But she let him have it a couple of times. Like she called him a fraud, a lot of stuff. I
Well,
only bring that up because you're right. I mean, that was controversial for a lyricist to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. And oh, give me your take.
well, as I've mulled this over, I I found myself, vacillating back and forth on different things, and I think where I finally landed, it's kind of like in math, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. So, feeling that way that, um, there are definitely some examples of lyrics that absolutely feel like literature to me.
Yeah.
If they tell a story, they evoke emotions, they resonate with you, they have staying power, they, you know, all of those things. And then then there's Sean Cassidy to do Run, Run, Run. And, you know,
Well, this is a
and,
great point because really, if you want to make a comparison, it's to poetry, right? Now, if we're gonna make a comparison, now when you're studying literature in high school and college, you're presented with what's thought of as the best. My guess is there was a lot of crap being published in the 19th century too that we just don't discuss. In so, you know, I do the same thing you do. Sometimes I think it's pop music. Come on, get over yourself. You know, like whenever I hear people gush about the Beatles, I'm like, oh, for God's sake, and another Beatles fan, spare me. But but then at the same time, like I'll go back and listen to a song I used to listen to. Like I've picked back up listening to a song by 10,000 Maniacs,
okay.
Trouble Me. Do you remember that song? I mean, you were around the same age. And I
Hmm.
can't help but just get the same feeling that I felt when I first heard the song when I was 15 years old.
Hmm.
It but it's a combination of how the music and the instrumentation and the lyrics.
Yeah.
I'm I'm with you. I'm inclined to go back and forth. Like I'm on the fence on it. I can't decide if it's literature or if it's a different art form that should be celebrated as something different than literature, but something important.
The article from The Guardian about music as literature was very interesting on this topic, comparing it to poetry. And it talked about the difference with music lyrics, saying that the um, the addition of the music and the voice and the cadence and the emotion that can be put in the voice was something that shouldn't be separated from the words because it made you experience it differently. And I totally agree
Yeah.
with it. However, no one ever says that Shakespeare isn't literature, and all of those plays were meant to be performed, not read.
Bingo. Yeah, I heard a podcast about that about 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Like, like, it was a podcast with Bill Crystal. I can't remember who the host was, the guest was, but he talked about that very thing. It's
Yeah.
like so many people experience Shakespeare on the page, which just does not give you the full experience.
Nothing is close to the way it is seeing it performed. And again, it has meter, it has all of
Yeah.
iambic pentameter, all of that business, but no one discounts plays as not literature. just because you don't always experience them in a live performance. And sometimes you read them and it exists
Yeah.
in both. And I think music is that way. And one of the articles talked about how it's becoming a thing now. There are lyricists, musicians that are publishing books off their lyrics. Kate
Yeah.
Bush just did one.
Oh, did she really?
Yes,
I didn't know that. I loved her in high school.
exactly.
Loved
So
her. Yeah.
I'm like, for certain playwrights or certain lyricists,
Lyricist.
I can see how their music is more poetic. And then there are others where it's music driven rather than lyrics. And
Oh,
there are ones that will admit that they give very little thought or weight to the words. It's more about the
oh,
music composition.
see, this is why I really want to discuss this with you because, you know, I have a couple of bands that I love, and their lyricists never really get the credit. It's Deep Purple. I love Deep Purple
Okay.
and Van Halen, David Lee Roth era Van Halen. Okay,
Oh, okay.
trust me here.
Okay.
So
All right.
Ian Gillan has talked about that. Ian Gillan's the lyricist and lead singer for Deep Purple. He's talked about this. He's like, usually the music comes first in that case. So they're jamming out or figuring out what the song's going to be about. So one song in particular they used to get hell about because they were coming out at the same time. Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Stairway to Heaven, all these kind of the deep hidden meanings there. And he wrote a song called Highway Star, right? And it's like nobody's going to beat my car, I'm going to race it to the ground. Nobody's going to beat my car, It's about a car, and then the next lyrics about a woman, and the next lyrics about the car again. And he's like that, man. The song, the music drove what the lyrics should be about, and it's gloriously, it was specifically not meant to be literature. It's some people are like it's dumb lyrics. Of course, they're dumb lyrics. It's rock and roll. It ain't, a great interview with Deep Purple's bassist Roger Glover. He went, it ain't folk music, you know.
Mhm.
So sometimes you get these songs and these lead singers and lyricists where you discount it because it's dumb. And it's like, of course it's dumb. It's supposed to be dumb. What was that line from Almost Famous? It's an art form that's gloriously and righteously dumb,
Yeah.
right? And anyway, I
I
interrupted, but
Yeah, I think I gravitate toward music that the lyrics are more a primary focus. And if the words aren't reaching me, um, I might as well just listen to classical music.
it's a type of rock and roll.
Hmm.
Like I mentioned, 2000 Maniacs. I love them. I love Cowboy Junkies.
I love
Maria McKee, Lone Just. I love where the lyrics come first, but I love me some you know Allman Brothers, man. Where I know what you're saying, but the anyway. I interrupted you again.
yeah,
I had a lot of thoughts about this.
yeah, yeah. There's it definitely runs the full gamut, and I don't think it ever answers itself. So one thing I did was I looked up what are some definitions of literature. If we're trying to
Oh, okay.
ask if musical lyrics can or cannot be classified as literature, maybe we need to be sure what we're talking about with literature. And what I found is there are some very different definitions of what is literature, depending if you're asking Merriam-Webster or the Oxford English or AI, ChatGPT,
Yeah, yeah.
get some different
I'm so
definitions. So
sick of that. Google.
here are some things I found. One, writings in prose or verse, and didn't give
It's
anything
it's a little vague.
like, well, heck, that could almost be my grocery list, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, another one was written words, especially those considered of superior or lasting artistic merit.
Okay, so the question there is, you're not going to know in the moment. You're
If it's
only going to know 20 years or 30
classic,
years
right?
later. Yeah,
And I think that's one that is used a lot academically in schools, whether something is literature is,
yeah.
that's how you end up having to read all the classics, right? Um, and then this one I thought was very interesting. Written works used to transmit culture.
Okay, that's my favorite definition. That's my favorite definition.
And I was like, okay, then. And in that context, there are definitely songs that qualify, and there are definitely songs that don't.
Yeah.
So,
I,
and then here's
yeah.
the last one that I found. This one a little wordy, so stay here, stay with
Mhm.
me. This one. Literature is the expression of life in words of truth and beauty, the written record of man's spirit, his thoughts, emotions, aspirations, the history of the human soul.
Dang, man. That's what we would call the DHM in the English class, the deep hidden meaning,
Yeah, so
right?
that one, but I like that written works used to transmit culture because I think that gets to the root of why we write, which is often the same reason why songwriters are writing songs.
Yeah.
They've got something to say.
Yeah,
And share it,
do you
right?
remember VH1 years ago would have these little bumpers. This was maybe about 20 years ago. And they had one from Peter Gabriel about what makes a good song.
Mm.
A song that might make you think, make you feel, and if you're lucky, make you move too, right? And so I
Mm.
think it's so interesting. I mean, the whole thing about popular music, just it's such an American thing. That's why I think so many people have such a problem because popular music just began in America, right? With jazz and stuff like that, and the blues and stuff, and coming into to the point where people start taking it seriously in the '60s or whatever.
Hmm.
But I'm inclined to again, like I said, it just depends on who it is, what the song is, and what your experience is. I doubt you would think a Van Halen song is literature, but at the same time, I'll hear a lyric from a song. I'm like, how did he think of something like that? Like when I think of like songs by like the Stones or like my favorites, Deep Purple, Van Halen, even Hendrix, stuff like that. I'll hear a line in a song. It might not be the whole song, but once I hear a line, I'm like, how did he just train his brain to just unleash that, to not hold back and just come up with a line so strange and bizarre, but cool too.
Yeah.
The one I wanted to mention was, and I guess you want to talk about some, right? You want to talk about some of your
No,
favorites?
no, no, go ahead.
Okay. So the reason why we're going to talk about this is the Van Halen song Unchained.
Okay.
And there's a line, nonstop talk or whatever rocker. And then he said, David Lee Roth writes, blue-eyed murder in a size 5 dress. I'm like, how did he come up with that? It's such a, and again, it's part of it is he's got to like have it hit the percussive points in that part of the song. But it's like, how do you train your brain to just vomit that on the page and say that's a great line for a song? I don't understand it. Like some of the things that Mick Jagger has written. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, how do you just let your mind just go free like that, and free associate and put that on the page and sing it? It's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Well, my daughter is a singer-songwriter, and
Hmm.
they got to perform in a cabaret in January in Seattle. And of course, I missed it by mere hours. She booked it after we'd already gotten our flights. She was flying in from New York a couple of days before I was flying in, because I was coming from Alabama because I had
Hmm.
gone to the memorial service. It wasn't January, it was December. And so I just missed it by hours. And of course, the airlines wanted $1,000 to rebook me to
Oh
get me
God.
to be there. So unfortunately, I missed it. But it is fascinating to hear, someone that that has that control of the language to play with words the way that
Yeah.
I think happens in music, in musical lyrics, than more than it does in other venue. And they had one of their new original songs, was titled "All Consuming Non-Consumer." I was like, oh, someone's got something to say about materialistic society here. This will be interesting. Um, so I love the freedom that music gives people to express thoughts that way and
Yeah.
say things in different ways that might not lend themselves to a normal narrative. So in that aspect, and I think the audiences that music reach is so vastly different than literature. I saw an appalling stat about how few people read books after
Yeah.
high school, after college, or just it really was painful. So sometimes I think we need more music as literature. We need, I hope we get some more great Bob Dylans out there writing some really cool stuff, things that stick in your mind and make you think about a situation or life in general or whatever it is,
Yeah.
but um, kind of wake you up.
Well, do you have I mean, I know you drove this topic, but do you want to talk about some of your favorites? I've got a few other people I want to talk
Um,
about and why I think they're
I,
important.
okay, I have for almost as long as I can remember, I've loved the band U2.
Of course.
They have some incredible, often known for some of their protest songs,
Of
their
course.
Sunday, those sort of things. And those are some powerful songs. And I think they have led a lot of people who maybe didn't know some of those historical facts to figure out what was going on there. Same thing for Where the Streets Have No Name
Yeah.
in India and all of the, and figuring those things out and starting to maybe care about things they didn't care about before. And I think it's wonderful. But then U2 also just so much of the human experience. You're such an observationist, and I will forever love their line, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle," because
All right.
it's pretty fabulous.
That's what I'm talking about. So sometimes you hear one line. There's a line I want to talk about in the song that it's a the band Roxy Music, Brian Ferry. Of course, Brian Ferry became very popular in the
Right
'80s.
there.
I love Brian Ferry too. I had not really dug into them. There's a song I think called "Pictures of You." At the very end, toward the end of the song, he's going through like a list of things like no mention the latest Tribune, and then just out of nowhere he says, "Too much cheesecake too soon." That's, I love that. When I first heard it, I was like, "What the flying frick?" And now, I think it's my favorite lyric in a pop song, just because of how obscure and abstract and ridiculous it is. And of course, I'm going to know what is, as I mentioned earlier, the deep hidden meaning. What is he talking about there? You know, that is funny because sometimes it's just about one line of the song that just captures you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the books I just gave my son for Christmas this past year was a book on the Beatles, but it's a story of every song,
Really.
how how that song was created, and a lot of times it's about those lyrics and from whose story they were pulling, or the mishmash of things that they put together to create that story,
Yeah.
um, that song. And sometimes it's about some more of the musical parts, but um, learning the origin of a song and how it came to be is some pretty interesting reading as well.
What's interesting is sometimes it's also the interpretation because pop music is the only art form where I think someone could take what you wrote and do a different version of it. And the two songs in particular I'm thinking of are "All Along the Watchtower," which was a Bob Dylan written song, but Jimi Hendrix, you know, created what is the most best known version. And then of
Mhm.
course, "Hurt," which it was Johnny Cash's last breath before passing away, written by Trent Reznor. And both Bob Dylan and Trent Reznor said it's their songs. It's not my songs anymore. Bob Dylan's. I've read. I've never seen Bob Dylan live, but I've read that he plays that "All on the Watchtower" the way Hendrix recorded it. And that's another fascinating thing is the way you can take someone else's song and reinterpret it, and it just becomes a different piece of art. You know what I mean?
It is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Um,
But the same
what?
can be said for plays. When you get a different production,
Yeah.
putting, not changing the lines of the play, using all of the original lines of the playwright, but the way they're delivered,
Yeah.
the way they shape their characters can give you a completely different interpretation of of a play. A whole story can feel completely different.
Yeah.
I think that's the artistic part.
You know, I know when a lot of people we talk about songwriters, we talk about the 70s and the acoustic guitar strumming, James Taylor's or whatever. But there are two that I think really deserve probably the Mount Rushmore. And I mentioned Joni Mitchell a minute ago. I mean, I love Joni Mitchell. I mean, "Help Me" is my one of my favorite songs ever. It's just gorgeous. But another guy that doesn't get much attention, and I think needs to, is Jim Croce.
Oh,
And the reason why I think about him is he was kind of the first. What pop music I think is lost is the blue collar mentality, the blue collar, lens. And he was a lineman. He was in the military. He was a power lineman for a little while. And so those great songs like Leroy Brown and Don't Mess Around with Jim and all that roller derby song. I mean, he had a blue collar, um, hard scrabble view of life. That's just it's fascinating, and we really don't have that anymore. You don't, I think the last person that really had a blue, the '80s was kind of the last vestige of that. You had Bob Seger, you had the Fabulous Thunderbirds, you had Stevie Ray Vaughan, like the blues thing, but like that blue collar, you know, lunch pail, Bob, Bruce Springsteen, and all that kind of Rust Belt rock they call it. That viewpoint's largely gone now, I
yeah.
think.
Yeah, I think digital media has made a big change in how we consume music and who can afford to make music and how we access
Yeah.
music. And I have a friend from college, went to Sanford, went to Vestavia High School, that has lived as a professional jazz musician in New York for decades. And he basically refuses to spend his time recording anything because
Really.
it's a net loss for him in the time spent recording.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that.
He only plays live, plays live
That's a shame.
all the time because he cannot make money recording his music anymore because the 1/100th of a cent per play kind of thing
Yeah.
is going to.
And it's a shame because the Spotify to me, I mean, I pay my premium. I mean, it's opened up a world of music I never would have learned about otherwise. So it's a double-edged sword. I mean, I'm discovering musicians and writers and that I never would have had a chance to otherwise.
Yeah.
You know. Hey, we got about 5 minutes left. You sent me a quiz.
Good.
All right.
Cool.
Explain it real quick.
Okay, so in the debate of music lyrics as literature or not, I came across a wonderful quiz where it took some pieces, some from poetry, some from music, specifically Emily Dickinson and Radiohead, removed punctuation and such, and just presents the line, and it's a quiz. You have to decide, is it Radiohead or Emily Dickinson?
You want to do a few?
Absolutely, let's do a
Okay,
few.
so we need to give credit. It's from
But I
a
will tell you, Radiohead's one of my favorite, and so is Emily. So,
okay. I am not familiar much with either, frankly. I mean, of course, it's studied, Emily Dickinson in high school, but okay, we got about we
okay,
need to make sure it's we'll put the link on Facebook, but it's bookriot.com. Is that right? Is it the
Riot.
website? Okay. All right. So go through a couple of these lines. We'll discuss who it was.
Oh, I'll pick some of my favorites. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I felt a funeral in my brain.
It's Dickinson,
That is
right?
Emily Dickinson.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, okay, good. I didn't forget high school English. Okay.
All right. Let's see. Let's see.
Dead silence is what we always want
I'm
on
sorry.
a
I'm so
podcast.
sorry. Okay. Why so green and lonely?
Radiohead.
That is Radiohead.
Okay. All right. Good.
One more.
All right.
How dreary to be somebody.
Oh, that's Radiohead, isn't it? Am I wrong?
It's Emily.
It's him. Ah, shoot.
How dreary to be somebody. Yeah. But it's a fun little exercise because it points out the similarities between the two.
Yeah.
And you know, and I'm not sure that this is a debate that is going to be ever definitively answered because music is changing and lyric is changing. One other quick thing I wanted to point out, just for I like to go deep into the academics of stuff. Some of our earliest writings that we consider classic, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey.
Yeah.
Those works originally were oral
Yeah.
poetry.
Of course.
And there is now good evidence that they were actually sung
Oh,
and
really?
accompanied by instruments,
Really?
because that is a mechanism that helps people retain the memory of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So I think that is an interesting question for us, because everyone would absolutely consider the Iliad and the Odyssey great literature.
Yeah.
But if they originated basically at song
Yeah.
lyrics,
Yeah.
what does that tell us? And I think there are a lot of oral cultures where that's how their stories were told, in song or
Yeah.
in storytelling, and passed along, and before they were written down, and they would definitely be considered those people's stories. And does that make them literature?
Yeah.
Lots to think about on this topic.
I like it. We ought to come back to this at some point.
I would
Uh,
love to hear from some of our listeners
it,
what their take is on it and what their favorite lyrics are from
yeah.
why.
I think we can certainly say that a good pop song is at least some form of art. A good one. And I think we got to debate what that is. But we've been on this for about 30 minutes. Why don't we take a break and come back with our reading recommendations?
That sounds great. And this is Kelly Rogers Flint back with Loyd McIntosh on the Rough Draft for our final segment here, our reading recommendations. What you got for us this time, Loyd?
Well, I've had I've kind of dug back into magazines recently, and something popped up that looked interesting called Esses. And I got the
Oh,
first issue here. It came last Saturday, and it's a large magazine about Formula One racing. And it's not really um, like a weekly magazine where it's just results and stuff like that. It's like a culture, I mean, lots of stories about things that made me sure. Like I said, I've only started to dig into it, but it's not like a normal magazine about the sport. It's
huh.
like the culture of the sport, and really interesting. It's a gorgeous magazine. It's expensive too. It's $25 a piece.
Whoa.
So yeah. So we talked about that with our print store issue
Mm-hmm.
episode a while back. That print magazines are becoming sort
Mm-hmm.
of a luxury item, and I would say this is. The story I've read so far, really good in-depth story about the 1955 Le Mans disaster. I don't know if anybody knows about that, but in
Oh.
1955, the Le Mans 24-hour Le Mans. There was an accident that spilled over into the stands, into the audience, and killed at least 80 people. It's the largest disaster ever in motorsports, and it's really that's about the time that motorsports and the outcry, because people were dying constantly in motorsports, and particularly in the 50s. The 50s were when cars really started to become really too fast for what was available for safety in those cars. And so, drivers were dying at a pretty big clip. Spectators were getting killed, but this one was such a disaster. It killed 80 people.
Wow.
To the car, launched into the over the barriers, and it was a big fiery disaster because we're talking about automotive fuel, and
Oh,
so
explosive. Yeah.
yeah, so it's a
Crazy.
great story. The only thing I worry about is that they may have just like gotten all of the great content in the first issue, and so that'll be But great magazine if you're interested in Formula One
Yeah.
racing, called SS. Great thing. Get it. And
Interesting.
Kelly, what
Yeah.
about you?
Yeah. Well, I have also been looking at nonfiction lately, and I just read, actually, I listened to a really cool audiobook, a memoir called Connie by Connie Chung. And I chose specifically to do that one on audio because she reads it herself. And um,
Hmm.
Connie Chung is a voice that we're all, or at least people of my generation, or grew up to listening to on the news. And so hearing her story in her voice added a layer to it that was really enjoyable for me. Not always is it a great thing when an author reads their own book because some of them don't have great speaking voices. They don't understand presentation, performance, or that
Yeah.
aspect of it. But of course, Connie does, and she's delightful. And you know what? She's quite funny. I wasn't,
Hmm.
I was not expecting so much humor. I certainly wasn't expecting so many penis jokes.
Now I've
Some
got to listen to it.
but when you start to think about, Connie spent a large part of her professional career being the only woman in the group. So I think there was, she had to get very comfortable with a lot of,
Yeah.
being in the boys' club kind of thing. Anyway, it's just delightful to hear her very unassuming path that got her through her career and the things we didn't see behind the scenes. And it's like revisiting part of your childhood because, like I said, we grew up, watching
Yeah.
Connie on TV. So, Connie Chung, check
Connie
it out.
Chung, is she still married to Maury Povich?
Yes, she is.
I know he's, they're both,
That's an
a little long
interesting
in the
part of the
tooth.
book as well. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
check it out. If
Cool. All right. Well, Connie Chung, it's just called Connie,
it's
correct?
called Connie. Yes,
Connie
just called
and
Connie. You can't miss it.
Connie.
Her photo on the front.
Yeah. And then, of course, S's issue one, fall 2024 came out. So they said fall 2024, but I think they were a little late getting it out. Is this being advertised now? So check it out.
Right.
Kelly, we got about a minute left or so. Good talking to you. We're going to try to not let 4 months go by before we do another episode. I promise.
No, yes,
All
we
right.
we will have a better plan in place and keep this thing humming along.
Yeah.
But glad to be back with you,
You
and
too,
looking
Kelly.
forward to the next one.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening. And again, this has been the Rough Draft, a writing podcast. Bye, Kelly.
All right.